Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. I'm just going to start off by doing a quick sound check. So if you can hear me, please type yes in your chat box. Just lets me know that you can hear me loud and clear. Can you hear me? Perfect. Perfect. Looks like we are live. Let me just double check, make sure. Yes, perfect. Apologies, there's two boxes on GoToWebinar where you can put a question or chat and they all come in different ones. So I want to make sure you can all hear me. So brilliant, thank you for doing that. So just a quick introduction from me. My name is Chantel Newton and I'm the Marketing Manager at the UK Contact Centre Forum and editor of our online e-magazine, Contact Centre Monthly. Just a few housekeeping points to go through before we begin. If you do have any questions for our panel today, please post them in the question box on your GoToWebinar panel, and I will put the questions to our panel at the end of the presentation. On your panel, you do have a section that says handouts, and I have posted a couple of slide decks to that section today for you to download. The first one will be Angela's slides, which she's not using today. She will be on camera talking to you, but she's provided these slides for your information. And the second set of slides are the slides that you will be seeing in Peter's segment. And they'll also be sent to you in a follow-up email afterwards. So the webinar today is expected to last approximately 1 hour. If you're unable to stay the whole session, the webinar is being recorded and the link will be emailed to all participants within 24 hours of the webinar ending. So I'm going to get today's session started. I'm going to hand you over to the very lovely Angela Clay. She's the Managing Director of HR for UK. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you, Chantal. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. As Chantal has mentioned, I'm Angela Clay and I am the Managing Director of HR for UK. HR for UK is a leading HR support organisation, but we also provide organisations such as yourselves with health and safety, payroll and pension services as well. We've got over 35 years of experience. We've got some fantastic 5-star reviews, and I would welcome you to go and have a look at our website if you want to have a look at our services that we offer. So today's webinar, as Chantal has said, is about looking at remote working. And my question is hybrid working leaving your business exposed? And I hope the answer to that by the time we get to the end of this webinar is no. And if it is yes, we've given you some tools to be able to take away and make some remedial changes. So with many businesses having come out of the pandemic, working patterns have dramatically changed, making hybrid working the new norm. There is a risk, though, that employers may not realise that their duties and obligations extend to their employees' homes. There are, of course, plenty of benefits from working from home, but have you considered the health and safety implications and how does this dovetail with HR? Making sure that you understand your legal obligations is essential for protecting not only your business, but also your workers. I don't want to assume that anybody on this webinar today knows what hybrid working is. So just for clarity, hybrid working is effectively flexible working. And this is where workers can work either from home permanently, whether they work from home sometimes, and whether they work in the office sometimes. Some employers will ask their workers to come in most days in the week and work from home a couple of days. Others will only require their workers to come into the office perhaps once a month. More and more businesses are offering hybrid working as part of their packages. As I've already said, there are plenty of benefits of working from home, but with this, we anticipate that there is going to be an increase in personal injury claims, and there's also going to be an interest by supervisory and regulatory bodies on how businesses approach the new working from home practices. On what we now know, there are millions of home working places around the country because, of course, people are working from home. There's going to be a real focus on ergonomics and the workstation setups, as well as the management of employee mental health risks, particularly stress. Health and safety is a key aspect of any workplace. It's something that affects employers, it affects their employees, which affects the business as a whole. Health and safety, of course, doesn't stop at the workplace, and more importantly, health and safety should be considered at home too. We know this because the Health and Safety Act of 1974 states quite clearly that home offices and home working environments are also the workplace. So with people working from home, and many employees are working from home, it is a reminder that employers still owe those employees working from home a duty of care. From an employer's point of view, it is important that hazards are identified and dealt with. Hazards such as loose wires, clutter, faulty equipment, fire risks, display screen equipment, and poor workplace setups can all pose a risk to employees. And it's therefore your responsibility as an employer to make sure that those risks are identified and measures are put in place to make sure that they can prevent any accidents from happening. There is, of course, the mental health aspect to consider, but that is a whole different discussion for another day. But knowing your responsibilities as an employer is a first step in implementing quality health and safety strategy. So let's just have a quick look at what are an employer's health and safety duties. Health and safety is something that affects everybody, and the correct rules must be followed, because this ensures the welfare not only of your business, but the welfare of your employees and, of course, yourself. So let's just have a quick look at those duties. Those duties include having a safe system of work, a safe place to work, safe equipment, safe and competent people working alongside you, because employers are also responsible and liable for the actions of their staff and managers. Carrying out risk assessments and taking steps to eliminate or control the risks. Informing workers about the potential hazards associated with any work process, including providing with the appropriate training and supervision. Of course, part of health and safety responsibilities and obligations is appointing a competent person for health and safety. And of course, finally, but not only, is providing adequate facilities for staff welfare in the workplace. Don't forget that workplace extends to home. So where do you even start with putting all of this together? Let's start with some basics. Let's look at educating yourself. The first step is to ensuring that your business meets all the health and safety requirements. Making sure you are prepared for any unexpected action to be taken against your business, as well as ensuring your employees and any visitors coming to your workplace are safe from any harm. Health and safety in the UK is a criminal and civil matter, no matter where you are based. And the possibility of a local authority taking legal action against you if you are in breach of any health and safety legislation is also something to be mindful of. As it's also a civil matter, there is also the chance that anybody affected by a health and safety related incident in the workplace may be able to take a claim through the civil courts and get compensation for such breach of legislation. My point to you today is to dedicate some time understanding the health and safety legislation. So the starting point, the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 is the best place to start. It's not only your responsibility when someone gets hurt or harmed, but it's your responsibility to prevent that risk from happening. Because of course we all know that prevention is always better than cure. As a business, you will also know that by law, an employer is required to have employer's liability insurance to cover any compensation costs if there is a civil claim that is carried out. Another place where you can go and have a look to educate yourself is looking through or browsing through the Management of Health and Safety at Work Regulations 1999. In this legislation, you will learn more about what steps you can take, what your business can take to prevent those workplace disasters. So while we are talking about those disasters, what should we be doing? How can we identify them? The starting point is to have a look at risk assessments. We all know that accidents can happen at any time, but we also know that they can be prevented. Most effective way of preventing an accident is by carrying out a regular risk assessment. And this way you will ensure that your business has a health and safety policy that is functional and fit for purpose for your business, because every business is different. A health and safety risk assessment can ensure that you are prepared for any health and safety issue that may arise. You can identify hazards such as slips, falls, and even things like spillages. Risk assessments should be carried out regularly. They should be completed and reviewed to identify those hazards and ensure that the relevant precautions are taken to ensure that those accidents or incidents don't happen. There are some simple things that you can consider when you are carrying out a home working risk assessment, and we'll have a look at a couple of those. I mentioned slips and trips. Well, we do know that staff can get injured by tripping over objects that may be at the foot of their desks working from home. There may be spillages in the kitchen that may not have been noticed before, but of course this poses a hazard and it also poses a risk. Manual handling. Moving heavy or handling heavy objects at home is also a risk to consider. Display screen equipment is another risk. We need to have a look at posture and back problems, because we know that those injuries and also injuries to hands and arms from poorly designed workstations. We also know that headaches and sore eyes from screens and bad lighting can also pose a risk. Working at height. You might be thinking, why would we be working at height? But of course, when someone is working at home, you might have that shelf behind you that has all your documentation stored, and you want to reach up to be able to get that. Well, using a chair when reaching that shelf, of course, will pose a health and safety hazard. We know that stress is another element of a risk assessment that needs to be carried out. And we know that staff will have stress, particularly where there is lack of control over the work that they are going to be working with, but also being able to disconnect from work. Electricity. An electrical shock or burn from faulty equipment also poses a risk. We know that electrical faults can also lead to fires. We know that people who are working from home, there is the risk of lone working. When someone is working at home alone, they could suffer injury or ill health while they are on their own. You will need to consider, how do you report accidents and first aid? Because of course, sometimes being out of sight is out of mind. If you don't know somebody has been injured at home, how are you going to be able to address that issue? So it is important that any risk assessment addresses those. I've already touched on fire, but other hazards such as domestic violence, stress and mental health, the workplace itself are all elements that need to form part of your risk assessment. What else can you do to have a look at your health and safety? Well, the next step is to implement a health and safety policy, or it may be multiple policies. The results of a risk assessment will enable you to create or update your health and safety policy. The health and safety policy standards as a starting point should in general include workplace rules and procedures and regulations, as well as informing your staff who is responsible for health and safety in your business. Of course, if you have more than 5 employees working in your employment, health and safety policy must be in writing. It is a legal requirement to have that health and safety policy in writing. But not only in writing, it should be readily available for your employees to be able to access at any time. Of course, each business will be different because every workplace is different, and a health and safety policy should be tailored to the work activities and your staff. So we've talked about the health and safety, risk assessment, the policy, we've talked about accidents and incidents. So how should we go about dealing with those? Of course, we know that it is a legal requirement for businesses to report certain incidents in the workplace, including those incidents that happen at home whilst your employees is working at home. Don't forget that that wider definition of the workplace is those working from home. So if there is a reportable incident that happens at home, don't forget that your obligation to report that either to your local authority or to the HSE or whichever appropriate body there is, it is your responsibility to make sure that that happens. So I hear you ask yourself, how can I protect my business? Well, the answer to that is quite simple, is by having an audit trail. Having a documented audit trail will go a long way in ensuring that you don't find yourself on the wrong side of an employment tribunal claim, a civil claim, or even a criminal claim. Having the evidence of a well-written, well-communicated health and safety policy is a starting point. It's also about making sure that your staff know where to find a copy of that health and safety policy and making sure that health and safety policy is regularly reviewed and updated. Having a breakdown of your health and safety training that you have provided your staff is another way that you can protect your business. Making sure that you have provided the appropriate training to your staff, for example, having a DSC assessment carried out, but not only having it done when they are first joining your company, but having those regular assessments to make sure that if there has been changes, this can be addressed and your risk assessment is updated. Of course, having a record of what training has been provided, having it dated, what that course is, and whether any refresher training is required and when that is going to be. As I've already mentioned, training is not just about at the start of an employee's employment with you. It's not only part of the onboarding process. It is a continuing obligation, particularly when it comes to health and safety. Making sure that you have a record of all those risk assessments, including those that you have done at home, is a good start to make sure that you are in the right place, because how else are you going to be able to carry out that risk assessment at home? How do you do that risk assessment at home? Giving your employees the tools to be able to do a proper risk assessment is essential in what you need to do. And that is a perfect segue to my colleague Peter, who has perfect solution available to you to ensure your employees are working safely at home. You have a clear and secure record that you will be able to show that you have taken actions, that you have delivered a demonstrable duty of care to your employees. But before I hand you over to Peter, just a quick 5-step reminder of the steps that you can take now to protect your business. Educate yourself and your employees. Carry out those risk assessments. Implement health and safety policy or policies. Make sure you report any incidences and document, ensuring that you have that audit trail. Peter, over to you.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you for a great segue into some of the more practical aspects now of how you can ensure that your employees are working in a safe, secure and regulatory compliant home workspace. But more importantly, if you had to, could you prove it? And we will mention some technology, if we move to the next slide, at the end of the presentation, which will allow you to provide very effective, very cost-effective and secure health, safety and regulatory compliance audits with your employees. So if we move to the next slide, what we're seeing at the moment, and we speak to lots and lots of customers, including contact centers and outsourced contact centers, and indeed contact centers within large organizations. Of course, when COVID struck 2 years ago, everybody was told to grab all of their stuff off of their desks and head home and do as best they could. It turns out that actually it's proven to be not only very successful, but very productive and also very cost effective. And so we're now seeing a lot of organizations moving, if not to fully remote, they're moving to a hybrid environment. And one of the things, as Angela had mentioned, is that you need to make sure that your employees are working in a safe, secure environment. And what a lot of companies have done is they've asked their employees to fill out a sort of a self-assessment and then sign the bottom of it to say that as far as they're concerned, they're quite happy and they are working in a secure environment. What we are seeing is that this is not good enough, and it's not going to be good enough as claims start to come in. So if I move to the next slide, this is an example of somebody that's ticked the boxes and said, yes, I do have an adjustable height desk, and yes, according to the health and safety DSE regulations, my eye line is level with the top of my screen. And what you're seeing in that picture is clearly not an appropriate work environment for somebody to be working in, but it would tick many of the boxes that current organizations are asking their employees to tick. And so the whole point here is, have you actually checked to see the environment that your employees are working in? Now, we've seen a few other organizations that are actually sending people to the home, sending managers to people's homes, which is clearly very intrusive and people don't like it. And is obviously very expensive and a very inefficient use of people's time. But the point here is, if you haven't checked, are you absolutely sure that if there was to be some kind of insurance claim or some kind of regulatory claim, which we'll touch on in a second, that people wouldn't be going to one of your employees' homes, inspectors wouldn't be going to one of your employees' homes and finding, what we're going to see on the next slide. So it's very, very important that you have a clear record of how your employees are working, and also any steps that you have taken to make sure that any action has been taken in terms of providing them with appropriate equipment, appropriate desking, appropriate seating, etc., etc. And I guarantee you need to know this before one of the regulatory bodies finds out for you, as it were. So if we go to the next slide. So who are the regulatory bodies that are now taking an interest in your home workspace arrangements? So if we go on to the next slide, the first one is actually the Health and Safety Executive. And not a lot of people are aware of the fact that the Health and Safety regulatory guidance clearly states that the employer has the same duty of care for their employees, whether they're working in an office, halfway up a mobile phone mast, or working at home. And there are a number of regulatory requirements that are all there on the HSE website for you to go and have a look at. But more importantly, if I go to the next slide, as Angela mentioned, to not carry through your regulatory requirements and your duty of care in terms of health and safety is actually a criminal act, and can also be followed up by an employee who's injured themselves at home via a civil law case. Now, one of the interesting things about a criminal act, is that you cannot insure yourself as an organization against acts of criminal acts. So you can't insure yourself for VAT fraud, you can't insure yourself for assault, as it were, in the workplace. And so any criminal act, including a health and safety violation, actually there's the possibility that your insurance will be null and void. And so the regulatory body may not just be coming after the company, it may actually be coming after the directors and managers who were involved in whatever lack of supervision or lack of regulatory propriety that was put in place. So it's actually really, really serious. If we then move on, to the next slide, there are a lot of outsourcers, call center outsourcers that work for insurance companies, or they work for banks or other kinds of organizations that are regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Now, the FCA, back in October of last year, actually put out a paper. It's available on the website, but I'll just call out this one element, which again, I'm not sure many people are familiar with. And I'll just read it to you. It's important that firms are prepared to take responsibility to ensure that their employees understand that the FCA now has the powers to visit any location where work is performed or business is carried out and employees are based, including residential addresses, for any regulatory purpose. And this includes both supervisory and enforcement visits. So those images that I showed you earlier on, again, you need to know about what's going on in that workspace at home before somebody like the FCA turns up, because there's been some kind of impropriety or some kind of breach of the rules, and or obviously the health and safety executive. And you need to be able to prove that you have done something about it. If we go to the next slide, many call centers and outsourced contact centers are doing a lot of work for government. And of course, the unions, in this particular case, Unison, are putting a big focus now on flexible working, the right to request flexible working and everything that goes with that legislation. But they're also now setting out clear obligations and an understanding of obligations for both the employer and the employee. So the employees are being made aware of the obligations and what they can claim for if those obligations are not met. So huge focus now from the trade unions on looking after their employees and making sure that their employees are being properly equipped and supported in the home. If we go to the next slide, of course, we then see that it's not just the trade unions, the insurers are starting to get very keen. And the reason for that is that there's a lot of risk involved, and you can see just on this Allianz website that home workers' welfare is under their risk management tab. And the reason it's there is because twofold. The first one is that if there is some kind of health or safety breach or an accident in the home, a trip or a slip, then of course the insurer will eventually have to pay out if it's found that the employer in some way has been negligent. Also, if an employee becomes ill through either some form of repetitive strain injury, or even some kind of a mental well-being type issue, and they get signed off from work, then it's the insurers that end up paying the permanent health insurance salary, as it were, for the employee whilst that employee is off work. So they're now taking a lot of focus, the insurers are making sure that employees are putting the right processes in place to minimize that risk of litigation and to minimize that risk clearly of having to pay out. And in fact, we've spoken to the health and safety executive now many times over the last 12 months. And one of the things that was both surprising, but actually very positive, was that I would say most of the discussion was not about trips and slips in the home, although that's clearly important, but as much to do with the health and well-being and the mental well-being of employees that are working from home, and what kind of practices are being put in place to support employees in that respect as well. So it's no longer just slips and trips. There's a much broader envelope in which employers need to make sure that their employees are being looked after. If we go to the next slide, you will see, of course, that we then get to the lawyers. So if you type in to Google, as it were, workplace injuries in the home or hybrid working injuries claims, you will see the pages just light up with lawyers who are now offering no win, no fee solutions for employees that believe that in some way they have been injured in the home through either neglect by their employer, or they're just they just see it as an opportunity. So again, we see in the coming months there will also be lots of adverts running on daytime TV with law firms offering their services to people working from home. So if we have a look at the next slide. At Cloudbase, we've developed an app that provides an online app-based solution for capturing information for employees working from home. It's a low-cost health, safety, and regulatory compliance audit. But more importantly, it captures any imagery or video recordings as well as an audit in a secure form. That means that you do not have to send somebody to the home, which not only means that it's a low-cost solution, but it also means that it's sort of pandemic appropriate and also non-intrusive in terms of how you go about capturing and storing the information with regards to that employee's workspace, not their home, just the workspace in which they work from home on. Next slide. It allows us to provide customizable surveys that are specific to you as an employer, and you can also capture employee consents and also image capture, where you need it to be captured. So, for instance, some FCA requirements may also require that your employee has lockable storage where they can put their laptop and any paperwork at night. So you can capture that as an image. This is hugely customizable per each individual organization, but it also timestamps and geostamps the survey so that we know that the survey was actually took place at the employee's home where they're working rather than at somebody else's place, and then it gets marked and securely stored and is tamper-proof. And because it's tamper-proof and gets watermarked, as we call it, it means that it can actually be used in court as evidence and evidential surveys. If we look at the next slide, we can also capture lots of data and information about how people are working from home, whether it be in this country or if you've got people working in overseas locations. You can create create a lot of reporting with regards to how many people have had an audit, how many people still need to have an audit, do they have the right desks, do they have the right chairs, have we taken action to provide the right things. And you can also put in some of the softer things into the survey around, are you having regular calls with your manager, do you feel supported, do you know who to call when there's a technical problem, etc., etc., etc. And of course you can pull out all this information either by department or function or management team, by region, or indeed by customer. If a customer wants to know how the people working on their account, one of your clients wants to know how employees are working on their account and what sort of environment they're working in and that they're secure and compliant, then you can also show that as well. If we go to the next slide, we can also provide through the data that we will give you easy to read, easy to use dashboards about where people are working, how many people are working in kitchens, spare rooms, dedicated workspaces, how many people have got all the right equipment, how many people have been checked, etc., etc. The reporting is limitless in that respect. So we do have those customized dashboards available. And if I just have a look at the next slide, for anyone that's interested, we can do online demos. We can take your management team through any demos to show how we can do both a self-assisted audit through an app, or indeed an assisted audit where somebody, a third party, us as it were, would pop up within the app and actually record and take the employee through the survey if if it was felt that they needed extra assistance in completing the audit, which takes between 12 and 20 minutes. So if we go to the final slide, I think. So one of the things that we're working on then is a sort of a compliance standard for the home, so that employers, and in particular contact centres and outsourcing contact centres, can show as part of any tender process that they're in, that they are providing employee workspace health and safety checks in the home. They are providing employee well-being checks. They are providing workspace regulatory compliance checks that adhere to whatever the standard is, whether it's the Financial Conduct Authority, the payment card industry's regulations, health and safety, GDPR, etc. And this is something that you can use to show that you do have a demonstrable duty of care, and you have shown that duty of care to your employees. If we look at the next slide. So I kind of split this as a 70-30 summary. So the 70% is that this is a way of making sure that your employees are working in a safe, secure, and regulatory compliant workspace, and that their well-being has been considered and properly managed. As part of that 70% is also to ensure and to show that your organization can be shown to have had that demonstrable duty of care and has got a secure recorded audit that includes all of the agreed checklists from the employer, any audit recommendations that were captured for the employee, and the employee consent to do that. And then the other 30% is very much focused on the organization, the business, to make sure that its managers and directors and shareholders have reduced the risk of any employee litigation and/or regulatory investigation and/or criminal prosecution, because they have evidential proof that they have properly checked the employee's workspace and have taken the actions required to make sure that that employee is working in a safe, secure, and regulatory compliant environment. And of course, now you have the evidence to prove it. And I think there's just the last slide, which is the contacts. And that's me done, Chantal.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you, Angela, as well. So if you have any questions, please post them in your questions box and I will get them to both Angela and Peter. I've just got a couple of questions to start with. So Peter, this one's for you. How can we participate in the home workspace audit standard? Are you there, Peter? I think you might be on mute.
Apologies, I was on mute.
There we go. That's okay.
We have a standard of requirements that we can publish and share with an employer, and then once we've done the audits with the employer, which again are very low cost, they can one of our team would go through with them any actions that needed to be taken, and they just basically need to can demonstrate that they have done a evidential audit of their employees.
Perfect, thank you. I hope that answers your question. So this is around fines from the HSE. So do you have any idea of the potential size of the fines if there was a health and safety breach in the home workspace?
So that's an interesting question. So I think a few years ago, people were quite surprised when the whole GDPR legislation and guidelines were sent out. And they were surprised to see the size of the fines, which absolutely caught everybody's attention. So, a GDPR fine can be a maximum of 20 million euros and or 4% of your global turnover for some form of data breach or GDPR breach, 4% of your global turnover, whichever is the higher.
Wow, quite lengthy.
From a health and safety perspective, there is no limit. So the fines are unlimited and can also include not just criminal action, but imprisonment. So actually, the health and safety requirements of fines and potential action is far more significant than you would find for GDPR. But again, as they say, not a lot of people are aware of that.
I suppose that sort of just backs up the importance of it as well, with the fines being unlimited. I think that sends a message from the HSE of how important these sort of aspects are to an organisation.
Correct. And actually, just on that point, an accident, you know, a trip or a slip or something else doesn't need to have actually happened. It's only the risk of it happening, if there was an inspection by a regulatory body, the risk of it itself could be enough to trigger an investigation if the employer was found not to have actually taken any action to have mitigated or even identified and therefore mitigated those risks in the first place.
Actually answers the next question that we had, but thank you for that. I've got a question here. How can they find out more information about the app? That would be to either contact Peter with his email, which is peter.hubbard@cloudbasepartners.com, or visit the Cloudbase Partners website, www.cloudbasepartners.com. And for any HR support with the subjects that we've covered today, please feel free to reach out to Angela. So the email address for Angela is angela.clay@hr4uk.com, and Angela's website is www.hr4uk.com. These will also be included in the follow-up email that will be coming out to you shortly. I'm just double checking. I don't think we've got any more questions. Let me just make sure we've answered them all. I believe we have. So I'm just going to wrap up the webinar. So it concludes today's session. I'd just like to say thank you to everybody for taking the time to join us today. A very special thank you to Angela and Peter for delivering such an insightful session. And again, if you do have any further questions for Angela or Peter, please feel free to reach out to them directly. Again, just to mention, the slides that Peter has just presented and also some slides from Angela are available in the handout section of your GoToWebinar panel. If you are having trouble accessing that, just send me a quick message or email and we can get them sent over to you directly. So for more information on UKCCF membership or our events, please visit our website www.uk-ccf.co.uk. Don't forget that the nominations are now open for our National Awards programme, which is taking place in November. Details and full information on how to obtain nomination forms can be found on the website under the awards section. And for anybody who attended our charity golf day yesterday, which I believe from feedback from Trevor went amazingly, we will have information and pictures up about that on the website very, very shortly. Also, if you would like to keep up to date with industry news, articles and blogs, you can visit our e-magazine website, which is https://www.contactcentermonthly.co.uk. Thank you again for joining us, and hope to see you all again soon. Thank you very much, everybody. Goodbye.